wet her, bed her, and bury her all in the same day.
At some point, every horror franchise runs out of places to go. So eventually, someone in a studio meeting says the magic words, "Let's send the Leprechaun to space," complete with terrible space graphics, lightsabers, cyborgs, and reused explosions. Today we're going to talk about Leprechaun 4 in Space, the fourth entry in the Killer Leprechaun franchise, once again starring the legendary Warwick Davis. If you've seen other horror sequels from the 90s, this is probably a familiar concept to you. Send a horror villain to space, probably on a spaceship. That's the pitch, that's it. That's all. The same year Leprechaun went to space, so did Pinhead and the Cenobites in Hellraiser Bloodline. And eventually Jason would make his voyage to the stars, but earlier sci-fi horror classics like Alien had already proven how well slashers worked in that environment. But Leprechaun 4 doesn't just borrow from space horror. It borrows from everything space-related. Part aliens, part weird low-budget sci-fi you've seen on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and completely committed to being a ridiculous B-movie. Look at the makeup they put on this space princess. She looks like she's out of Logan's Run. And honestly, that's kind of why I love it. They said, "We have no budget. Fuck it. We're still going to space." By the time Leprechaun 4 in Space went into production, the series was firmly in the direct-to-video world. The movies were being produced by Trimark Pictures, a company known for quickly producing genre films designed to succeed on VHS rentals and late-night cable, as opposed to theatrical releases. That business model encouraged experimentation, which is probably how somebody pitched this idea in the first place. What if the Leprechaun was an alien king in space? And instead of saying no, the studio said, "Yeah, sure, here's some money." The film was directed by Brian Trenchard Smith, who had already directed Leprechaun 3, which I fucking love. So if I had been in the horror space at the time, I would have been stoked that he was returning. And his philosophy with the franchise was pretty simple. Don't fight the absurdity, embrace it with loving arms. Which explains why Leprechaun 4 goes further into camp than any movie before it. The movie opens on a distant planet where the Leprechaun has apparently become some sort of intergalactic tyrant. Yes, at this point he's not just after gold. Similar to Leprechaun 2, this time he's after a bride. Specifically, he's trying to marry an alien princess and rule the galaxy. Whenever I'm questioning something that's happening in the plot of one of these movies in this franchise, I remember two very important words. Fuck it. That princess, played by Rebecca Carlton, at one point flashes her breasts to intimidate the men, and I guess everybody in the room, because on her planet it's a death sentence to be flashed by royalty. Meanwhile, a squad of space marines arrives to stop the Leprechaun once and for all. If that sounds familiar, it should. Because the entire space marine structure of this movie is clearly inspired by Aliens. You got a group of armed soldiers, a spaceship, and a monster stalking the crew aboard. But instead of a terrifying alien creature, it's a 3-foot-tall rhyming goblin that may or may not shoot up your pee stream while you piss on his torn-apart corpse, then re-emerge from your penis later when you're trying to have sex, killing you and denying your last nut.
Let that be a lesson to you, lad. Always wear a prophylactic.
Truly diabolical shit. By the fourth film, Warwick Davis is clearly having the time of his life. The Leprechaun is now way less of a horror villain, more of a cartoonish version of a slasher villain. He taunts soldiers, he makes terrible puns. He casually murders people between jokes. One of the reasons this works so well is because Warwick Davis never plays this role lazily. Even in the most ridiculous scenes, and there are a lot of ridiculous scenes, he stays completely committed to this performance. And that commitment keeps the movie entertaining even when the script gets completely insane. What makes Leprechaun 4 stand out is, at this point, it's fully embraced its B-movie identity. The set looks like something out of a low-budget 60s sci-fi movie. The effects are cheap but ambitious. The computer-generated ship looks like complete dog shit, even by 1996 standards. Please, sir, I'd like some more pixels. At one point, Mitten Spider explodes, and later on, the Leprechaun is sucked out and into space. Spoiler warning, by the way. And he explodes. Wait a second, let's see that again. These are the same goddamn shot. Not like they used a fire explosion comped in and just reused the same elements. No. It straight up cuts from outside in space to back in the ship for the same explosion, and they thought we wouldn't notice. Fucking peak cinema. It's so brilliant I could cry. The The soldiers are basically space action figure characters, but they do have Miguel A. Nunez Jr., and in my opinion, that's the best space marine that's ever existed. The plot includes some absolutely wild moments, including the Leprechaun exploding into pieces and regenerating like Cell from Dragon Ball Z. The Leprechaun doing a John Wayne impression. I never did care for John Wayne. A sequence involving taking a spider and a scorpion with princess DNA, blending them in a kitchen blender, and injecting it into this 1/3 of a mad scientist, which ends in a Cronenberg-type existential disaster in space, very reminiscent of The Fly from 1986. It's not subtle and it's not meant to be taken seriously. That's why he literally says like,
I am no longer Mittenhand. I am now Mitten Spider.
They're basically saying, hey, look, it's like The Fly. It's like when people question why Sharknado was made. Why was there a Leprechaun in space movie made? You're appalled at the concept, but you had to watch the train wreck, didn't you? I'm going to use some 90s slang for this. So, the dude was about to score. Instead, the Leprechaun emerges from his penis, and, well, let's be honest. I'm disappointed this isn't a bloodier scene, but whatever. I'm not saying I wanted to see his penis, and body torn apart, but Leprechaun should be coming out in blood, right? Scenes like this have helped contribute to the cult following this has received over the years. Like, this is hilarious and memorable, even if it isn't the most well executed. Despite the chaos, Leprechaun 4 in Space is often considered one of the worst entries in the franchise. And to be fair, those criticisms make sense. I absolutely get it. The story barely makes sense, the budget limits are obvious, and the sci-fi elements feel like they wandered in half drunk from a completely different movie. If you're expecting anything remotely grounded in horror, you will not get that here. But personally, that's why I'm a fan. For me, this is where the franchise fully becomes what it was always meant to be. A ridiculous horror comedy series where the only rule is that the Leprechaun causes chaos in increasingly absurd environments and kills people. Now at this point, this is the 4th movie in the franchise. Both the 1st and 3rd rely more on gold. And the 2nd and 4th both rely on this bride element. Honestly, it's not terrible, it's kind of consistent. But at this point, they're just fully self-aware B-movies. And Leprechaun 4 might be the most honest example of that. It's loud and silly, and I enjoy the hell out of it. It's clearly inspired by sci-fi classics like Alien and Aliens, but filtered through the lens of a direct-to-video slasher film, which gives it this weird charm that makes me feel at home. That's what we call nostalgia, I think, but it works for me. In the years since, it's definitely become something of a cult favorite, not necessarily because it's good in the traditional sense, but because it's so unapologetically strange. The series would continue after this, obviously, eventually sending the Leprechaun to urban LA, as the 90s would call it, leaning even harder into the comedy. Love it or hate it, this is one of the most memorable movies in the franchise. Probably one of the most divisive, too. This is going to be high up on a lot of people's lists, and it's going to be low. I feel like it's not going to be very middle of the road. Leprechaun is a franchise that has lots of ups and downs, but I don't think this is a down. I think this is up. Quick thank you to my channel members and Patreon subscribers. If you want more ectoviolence, including exclusive videos and behind-the-scenes content, become a member by clicking the links in the description below.